There are so many conflicts going on right now in the Middle East. Forget the wider world, just the Middle East itself. Do you know how many millions of people recently have been killed or displaced in Sudan, in Pakistan, in Yemen, in Syria? Not to mention all the other wars and occupations taking place around the world. 2 million oppressed Uyghur Muslims under China. Anyone seeing any big marches out there on the streets? Anyone seeing wall-to-wall coverage where it's literally an icon in the BBC News headline for all these other far more deadly conflicts? Far more deadly conflicts. No. Well, I guess it's because Israel is meant to be part of the West, and so we put Israel to... Well, what about Turkey? Turkey's occupying Cyprus, northern Cyprus, and there's been all kinds of pressure with regard to Pakistan displacing Afghan refugees. If you look at it, you'll notice that throughout history, whether it's today or in prior times, it's always the extremes of ideologies. You look at the people that have been most opposed, let's say, to Jews and their modern state and throughout history, it's often people who are in the darkest recesses of human thinking and ideology. And what that means is that if the hatred is coming from the most dark corners of the world, dark ideologies, dark ways of thinking, then that means that they must perceive, darkness hates light. And that means that they perceive Judaism, Jews, the Jewish people, as a source of light and an enemy to them in their minds. Which is a real compliment, actually, in a strange kind of way. I think if we think about a person who really decided in all of history, he decided to take the cause of annihilating the Jews to the most extreme, it would obviously be Adolf Hitler. And he was he was interviewed by a man called Hermann Rauschning, who ended up joining the Allies, moving to America. But he had many conversations with him when Rauschning was still allied to Germany. And he said, let me be very clear, I'm trying to bring the world back to being a state of barbarians, back to just the animal kingdom, the law of the jungle, social Darwinism. That's what he wanted. The dominant, this Aryan race. That's what it's got to be all about. And who is the greatest threat to that? The people who introduce morality, conscience. He said conscience. This is Hitler's own words. Conscience is a Jewish invention. He said it is a blemish just like circumcision. Because circumcision, by the way, represents this idea that we're not going to be governed by all our animal instincts alone and desires. We're going to be in control of them. We're going to overcome those urges and channel them, not to deny them, but channel them in holy and good ways. And so for Hitler, that's literally the opposite. This idea of caring for the poor, the weak, the vulnerable, this idea of dedicating yourself, your life to something higher than you and your own grandeur, it was so opposite to everything Hitler was about. And he saw the Jews, the Jewish people, as the people that introduced this concept to the world. And so you'll notice that there's always, whether it's anti-Semites of today or prior times, there's always a moral critique that comes with hating the Jews. Whether it was in medieval Christian Europe or, as I say, in Europe in the last century or today or in ancient times, it always comes with a moral critique. You Jews are evil, you're bad at this, because they need to somehow justify ignoring that light of conscience, that moral voice that the Jewish people, whether we intend to or not, have represented throughout history. And so that's what's really going on at a deeper level. If you think about it, every great moral ideology has to in some way contend, especially if they are in some way an offshoot of Judaism, which many ideologies are, they have to contend with what is our relationship with the Jewish people. Has God forsaken them and rejected them now? And are we the new? And especially when you have a re-establishment of a homeland, what does that mean? I thought they were just this wandering exiled people throughout all of history. So how do we make sense of that? And so they have to contend with it, and you can contend with that in a philo-Semitic way, where you say, well, actually this shows that God still honors his commitment and his relationship with the Jewish people, and it's an amazing story of succeeding despite all odds. Or you have to find a way to demonize them and say, no, we have to be gotten rid of. We just need to finish the job. But either way, you have to deal with them somehow. And we actually have a video hopefully coming out this week on JTV where we're going to dive much deeper into this very issue, the deeper underpinnings of anti-Semitism. But that's really what it's all about. And amazingly, if you read the Talmud, there's pages and pages of discussions on all kinds of seeming minutiae issues in Jewish law and halacha. But when it came to discussing anti-Semitism, it took the rabbis about a sentence to define it. They said the sina, the hatred of the nations, the anti-Semitism that exists within people around the world. By the way, I think it's sometimes disproportionately covered. I think there's a lot more love than there is hate among non-Jews. But, or at least just ignorance and apathy rather than hatred. But it says, where does that hatred arise from? And the rabbis use a play on words. They say it comes from Sinai, from Sinai. Sina, which means hatred. Sinai is Mount Sinai, the mountain where God charged the Jewish people with this mission to be a moral voice to the world. And so it's that hostility, this idea that actually life isn't about me. It's about adhering to conscience and morality and serving God. That's what the hatred is. It's a hostility to that mission we were charged with at Mount Sinai. And what's amazing is that, though I'm sure that man, Hermann Rauschning, who ended up joining the Allies, probably hadn't read this verse in the Talmud, he said, quote, it is the eternal, anti-Semitism is, quote, the eternal call to Sinai that humanity again and again rebels. Literally, totally in line with what the Talmud's saying.